welcome all of you, and welcome Bruce Andrews to UC Berkeley for the first time ever. Happy to have you. I'm John Shoptaw, and I'd like to first advertise a couple of future readings in the Roberta C. Holloway series. Next up, April the 8th, a pianist, a Cajun pianist and poet, Oni Buchanan, who will be performing at the Center for New Music and Audio Technology, as well as for us. So that's, I think, a first for us. And the Welsh poet on April 15th, you'll remember that day, April 15th, Gwyneth Lewis, who was the first national poet of Wales. That should be a truly interesting reading. Her poetry is fantastic. I just read it recently, so those are two great readings coming up. April 8th, Oni Buchanan. April 15th, Gwyneth Lewis. Tonight, Bruce Andrews will be listening to Simona Schneider, who will be the graduate student reader from comparative literature, introduced by Lin Chu, also from comparative literature. And then Bruce Andrews himself will be introduced, as I'm scanning the audience here, by Colin Dingler, who was here, Colin, from Rhetoric. So I think with everyone introduced and named, I'll yield the floor. Thank
you. That the facts of one's life are inseparable from the fabric of one's imagination, so art practice cannot be separated from life practice. Simona Schneider is a poet, translator, journalist, photographer, filmmaker, fictioneer, and student. She is all of these. So it is not a surprise that her work is at home where the thresholds between languages, forms, and disciplines are most palpable. And for one who's coming into craft comes also with the responsibility of laying oneself bare. Here I am thinking of the dare that Baudelaire took on in his last days in Brussels, a dare he read in Poe, who suggested that any man daring enough to write a book with such frankness as one titled, My Heart Laid Bare, the project would surely be a masterpiece. It is my understanding that Simona writes also, always from such a dare. Illumination is always a thing that is bargained for and wrestled from the innermost. Even playfulness, that is, playfulness in her work, rehearses a kind of magic, attuned to the superstitions that language itself envisions, nevertheless attentive to the everyday. Her writings have appeared in the Brooklyn Rail, Coconut Poetry, Ellie Mae, and others. Her visual work has shown at the Seville Biennial. Her co-translations with Eugene Ostashevsky and Rebecca Bella of the Russian poet Dmitry Golinko was published by Ugly Duckling Press and was a finalist for the Best Translated Book of 2009. It gives me great joy to introduce to you this wonderful artist and my good friend, Simona Schneider.
Thank you so much, Lynn. That was wonderful. I'm just gonna have some water. It's nice to see this series in the daylight. So I wanted to thank Lynn again. That was a lovely introduction for layering all my layers into something understandable. And also to the Holloway series for inviting me, to John Shoptaw and Charles Legier, who organized this. And to Bruce Andrews also for having me, and for the wonderful posters that were produced for the series. So I'm going to read a couple of new poems. I haven't read, I was saying, in a little bit of time because I was living in Tangier and English was not widely spoken. So I thought I would be daring and read new things. And I will also be reading from some short excerpts from a longer work that I was working on in Tangier called The Clothes. And I'll tell you about that before I go into it. So I'll start with a couple poems. I must have done something to offend the mechanism that shuns me, to rotate the year, tighten the spring, meter the chrono of the Cronus, beat out at rhythm spirits, lame, noose surfers, rare riptide. I said I wanted to help, waiting incapacitated, me away from you, lightning split the screen. And what if this book lost its luster, do you wonder? Only the anchor of it makes thunder. Me wake, the solidity, firmness, hardcover, said the woman who loved to read as she turned out the light. And this is, I chose this one because Charlie Legier's wife is very, very pregnant, and this begins, and what it means to give birth at such a time of expectation. So this is for Louise. And to feel something at your back that isn't there. Okay, that's good. Okay. You live one life, said the Stygian wind. Losing letters I pick up, so that if I had just two, I would do, at, it, if, to, my, pie. The mind in holes, a feeling to last, is always felt on a bridge, between two connecting molehills. Each platform is infinite, room for you who lives outside of space. If I had three, oh, the possibilities, and meet a band of balladeers, singing in windfall like the certain cackling coming through the wall that is a steady wind. Did you ever hear your joints crack like bridge trappings? How is it that every time I cross it is the first time, and all the other times at once, only the light changes? The train whistle and the bell tower, stories without moral, senses without time, its own demise, a thoroughbred bear in the hungry forest, a rain heard and unseen, a drinking done and unspoken, now beginnings, bottled emotions, avoiding the lungs. Our Lady of Guadalupe burns, put it outside the window, but open wide the possibilities. Sun upon a furled flag, painted on a wagon in the yard, wanting for the whistle on the teapot's time. The clouds roar by, rejoicing in their intention of light. Let me go bald in my old age, command timelessness, or go blonde in homage to Hollywood. What does beauty serve once it is clocked? Take your poetry with your petri dish. The ultimate responsibility is to the present. One who feeds baseballs into the pitching machine, a sweeter sugar, numb crystals, it grows faster than I. If I had four to gallop in a steeplechase, hair left to embrace the honeysuckle, a grass of unruly dimensions and free. And if I had 5, words that would not exist, creative, art, boundaries, song, poet, exist not to exist, to help to have a place to turn, a lighthouse, an earth, a tree by which to measure time in concentric circles, drawn, a thing around which the heart is a highway. Put them where I can find them, the words you spoke, in need of me, a happy or sad time, an ongoing time, held in rain. In front of football, the ball we watch, an oblong fate, a breezy goal, awaits a gate, and the goal keep, making daisy chains, a hummingbird's wings. There where we meet, in the breast of the bird, in the needle of its beak, we take its round head in our hands, deflect it up and down, reflect its song into the sky, opening for a bigger than it. Okay, so now I'm going to read something a little less dense, perhaps, or I don't know. It's more prose. This is called The Clothes, and I chose the title based on, or in homage to Georges Perec's Les Choses, The Things, which is about a young couple who goes to North Africa, basically to be able to afford, they're a young French bourgeois couple, basically they go to be able to afford all the vintage luxuries that they desire. And the main story in my work is a love story about a young American girl named Melody Taylor, who goes to Tangier to figure out what love is in all its many forms, and she does so by pursuing her explorations with a tailor. And I'm reading it because, as such, it is somewhere between a memoir and a fiction, so I think it has a lot in common with poetry. And it's also a kind of fake or mystical ethnography, one could say. The following words are made up of the same 3 letters in Arabic: plural, to collect; association, university; Friday, altogether; mosque, junto in the Spanish sense, and ensemble in the French. Some of these words have one of the sick letters in them. These letters are unstable. They metamorphize. They are always uneasy and can be pushed around. Or you could think of them as accommodating or flexible, but they are not easygoing. They are not significant counterpoints to the idea that all the words above are the same as much as they are different, as unstable as they are complete. Melody had a slight problem with the pronunciation of them, and often said phrases such as the following: "Drop me off at the corner of Friday. I'm going back to the plural to study. Why don't we all go mosque?" She tried to explain that there was a difference between speaking eloquently, the literal meaning of classical Arabic, and speaking Moroccan. She wanted to say eloquently that most people from the Gulf couldn't comprehend Moroccans, but the Moroccans could understand people from the Gulf. It was the same for the French and the Spanish, and in this way, Moroccans were like a 2 or 3 or 4-way mirror. Instead, the Gulf became autumn, and autumn became letters. They laughed their heads off at the idea of people from the land of letters. Always the connections between things to their most elementary particles hides just underneath. She made a crucial leap in speaking at the end of 1 year. She realized that she couldn't take the expressions having to do with God so seriously. As soon as she had absorbed these expressions into her vocabulary, her edges started to bleed a little in the manner of a watercolor. At first, she didn't say them because she was an outsider and because she questioned her right to ask God to bless people if she had no relationship with God and knew very little about the specific God in question. As she picked up other vocabulary, she felt even further outside of some central node. She knew the slippery name of Allah transformed itself into the sounds le, as in let, and allow, in addition to having 99 variants with different sounds, so that sometimes she might even be saying it without knowing. Hopeful parents agreed that one semantic precision of this God's noble qualities would serve as an angle of reflection to the world. If she wanted to avoid God's many attributes, she would have to avoid calling people by their names. She learned to ignore her doubts in order to stop begrudging people. So this is another excerpt. The morning always started with all the fingers gathered around a point directed at the face in the crowd or the window frame, above a soft and steaming brown coffee, the color of rich soil. There between the fingers is an anchor in a body of nothingness. They say nothing and nothing is said. The point appears at the other side of the window, like in a mirror, and we know that in that nothingness there is joy. A man with a t-shirt that says freshness blows through the door of the cafe at the heart of the tornado of the city, just underneath from the bar restaurant called Cœur de Tanger, Heart of Tangier. Good morning, Mohammed. May God forgive your mother. We've all sinned. It's a good assumption. There were so many people named Mohammed that it was also the general form of address to any stranger. You could call it out and watch how many people turned around and answer. It was a fun game, or at least that's how it had been explained to her. A woman next to the door with a friend, both dressed in red and black, puffs away at a cigarette with her rusty henna'd hand and rhinestone-rimmed watch. Outside, along the flare-bleached marigold of the French consulate wall, are a pair of pants. A girl's head floats way above. She thinks she may be wearing a white jacket, but Melody's eyes can't adjust. Nonetheless, there are witnesses who could find her for you if it was love at first sight. There was always a witness here. Hard to resist with that halo. The apparition waited a long time, then gave up and loped off, ducking underneath a ladder with two blood-red rags tied to its extremities. Somebody went along after her, a suitor perhaps, following to see with whom she might have business. Mostly he wanted to make sure the angel she looked to be was suitable for the suiting. There was no idea that things might be too good to be true. There were angels and princesses. They were what they were with margin for error. One only had to be pious and respectful to that power, greater than oneself, but one could have his paradise on earth too. A world that opens up anew 99 times, then starts again. Here the man went off in pursuit of it, slick-haired and agile from acrobatics. Above her flew the Christmas-colored Moroccan flag, blood red, with a green modified Star of David. Symbols are hard to read. Kay asked Melody to marry him, but first he asked her to coffee. The master, as he was called, was skilled at turning raw sheets into shells suggestive of human forms. Clothes sat on, fell over, shielded, or in rarer cases hugged the body. He was able to take perfect nonsense and cut and sew it so that it was no longer nonsensical at all, but inexplicably attractive in its controlled abstraction. A Paris cafe spilling onto a sidewalk, or meters of meteors flying through a black sky with sparkly stars, became, in his hands, a long robe with slits into which hands could disappear along the curves of the hip line. You could see a lady searching her pocket for money. Sometimes you could count the change. The robe slits were openings that led to another, less fantastical layer of clothes that one glimpsed if one looked. Underneath were pants, or more often pajamas, that swished and folded at the bottom in the lazy way of synthetics. The wind or the legs worked on the robe, making it flicker and snap like a flame, the other layers engulfed. While Melody waited her turn in line, she did Arabic exercises. She had learned the word for echo earlier that day and tried to remember it. She remembered it was like a car. A Nissan? No, it was just a generic sedan, not particularly Japanese. She practiced the gymnastics of plastics. A single Moroccan robe with a hood is called the jaleba, but many are called jalaleb. It was the syndrome of the broken noun. Words were distorted when plural. Even the most conservative item got turned inside out and made the tongue flip out to include other thoughts. The most important thing for her was to be understood. She didn't imagine a marriage proposal from the tailor because usually complete strangers like to throw them at her in the beginning of every conversation, and they had already known each other for a few weeks. In addition, he had met her boyfriend. Marriage was one of the first words she learned in this new language, even before she learned boots. It was raining when she arrived. She thought she had fabricated hearing it, cut it out of other words, but there it was again. She had always been afraid of it. But he was talking, and there was the word zooage. Something about a zoo, she smirked. A unicorn with a low fence. Hadn't she gotten the better of that word that way, she thought, but he didn't understand the joke. He said the word again, and out of it sprung the idea, the possibility. She kept thinking she was making this conversation up in her head. She was either full of herself or a fool of herself, both amounting to the same thing. He wanted to understand with such force that he put his entire body into it, and all of a sudden it did seem possible. While she looked for a word or a way of rephrasing, remixing his words, he didn't fidget or sip his coffee. He remained facing her, hanging by a thread, in anticipation of what her mind would produce. Whatever challenge, he would face it. They had walked a long way from his shop. The long way from his shop on the outskirts of the town to the chic cafe at the center made it sound more serious and made her bitterness more pronounced. They said, this is what every woman secretly, even subconsciously wants, and she was paranoid of a stereotype of her own subconscious. A lighter her friend had shown her flashed into her mind. At first glance, it pictured a finger with a diamond ring, but upon closer inspection was actually a penis with a ring, a global community's Freudian slip. In her culture, it was a joke between women that one had to trick men into marrying, and here it seemed she was the one being tricked. She looked at him cockeyed, trying to provoke a good hearty laugh, an admission that his talking about marriage before they knew each other was exaggerated, extravagant, almost burlesque, The message was ineffectual in reaching a cynicism that did not exist. She saw only earnestness reflected back at her. It made her feel terrible. The question of how they might go about living together till death do us part seemed an improbable way to begin a friendship or work relationship with someone, but he insisted on fleshing out all the possibilities right from the beginning, on describing what model he would make out of that particular fabric, if it were available. He was modest. If you plan it right, just like a pattern, then cut along the lines, it will come out the way you wanted it. Could I wear a modern scarf, like around my neck? Could I do what other girls do and wear a headscarf with a miniskirt or a headscarf with a mini dress over pants? She asked. All of these notions came with French or Spanish names, pantalon, minifalda, so here she could communicate quite readily. There is no such thing as a headscarf with pants, she said. Sure there is. Look at that. Just then, two girls in their late teens, dressed identically, strolled by arm in arm, each with their own pink bodysuit and black low-cut castaway dresses over black pants, emphasizing their figures on the background of hot pink flesh. They were topped with black headscarves. He looked seriously and said, "That's not a possibility." In his store's window, there was a shiny copper-haltered disco dress that fell halfway down the thigh, and it made her wonder. The next time she came to his shop, she would ask if it was for sale. She would buy it from him. He wouldn't want to marry her anymore. That was her plan. Thank you.
I tried to keep it short, but I fear it became sort of medium. Is that okay? Oh, no? Better? Yeah, I'm kind of scared of this thing. That's okay now? You're presented with the strategy. You're presented with the rhetoric. You can see what it is designed to do, says Bruce Andrews in a 2006 interview. This could be Andrews talking about his poetry, much of which foregrounds the structures and strategies that make that ubiquitous goop we call language so sticky. But actually, it is Andrews speaking about his pedagogy with the esteemed political commentator Bill O'Reilly on his Fox network show, The O'Reilly Factor. In addition to being a prolific poet and essayist, Andrews has taught political science at Fordham University since 1975. A concerned O'Reilly wants to know why Andrews assigned as required reading in his undergraduate poli-sci class a book criticizing the Bush administration, and moreover, why the syllabus wasn't ballasted with a single pro-capitalist or even pro-American text. You're feeding the students a one-world view, accuses O'Reilly, presumably hyphenating one world so as not to confuse with his show's monolithic worldview. Overall, it is a remarkable interview, and I strongly encourage you to watch it on your YouTube. Remarkable not only because it surely marks the first time an avant-garde poet has reached millions of viewers below the Bible Belt, but also because it illustrates how carefully and skillfully Andrews puts pressure on deceptively simple language in order to show, quote, what it is designed to do. He applies some of the pedagogical skill that O'Reilly is interrogating and that we also find in his poetry, to O'Reilly's own line of argument, calmly refusing to be put on a dumb show trial. And you can hyphenate that as you like. Unflinching, Andrews parries O'Reilly's verbal blows, asking him to clarify the impressive jumps in his logic. Naturally, his interviewer slips into ad hominem attack, but it appears that O'Reilly's crew did not do much research into their professor. He even forgets Andrews' name at one point. But what a character they would have found. Beyond the lengthy list of his accomplishments as a teacher and academic, Andrews has co-edited a hugely influential journal of poetics, you know, the one with equal signs. He has written over 24 books of poetry, put out a book of his own essays, Paradise and Method, and collaborated with musicians, visual artists, and dancers on a variety of performance pieces. Recent works include the 2007 Swoon Noir from Chax Press, Designated Heartbeat in 2006 from SALT, collaboration with Sally Silvers and dancers, and the 2001 Lip Service, which rewrites Dante's Paradise using an experimental method of translation that may involve one of Andrew's preferred literary devices, the paper cutter. I amused myself imagining that O'Reilly had realized who he was speaking at. How would the interview have played out if he had read one of Andrew's poems? Skimming the remarkable contents page of Andrew's 1992 collection, I Don't Have Any Paper, So Shut Up, or Social Romanticism, he could have alighted on such jewels as Help Defeat Your Country, We Are Not a Country, Stalin's Genius, or one which could be the O Factor's slogan, Everything You Don't Know Is Wrong. Given the interview was about Andrew's pedagogy, perhaps O'Reilly would have read from Education Helps Me Squirt. I'd love to suck her thyroid glands, tuck, sump, scraping little turkey bits off people's teeth, accept your lot and do it, woolly bully saturation recipe. People look good underground, cops in miniskirts. A man wears a hat on his genitals. Be Lotto's next sucker. In fact, Andrew's books are chock full of squirting, frizzing, putzing, spitting, dripping, and all other imaginable tweaking of the body and its props. There's a lot more orifice in this poetry than Orpheus. And we find plenty of dicta to suck on. Don't worry, the experience is surprisingly educational, although sometimes reading an Andrews poem elicits in me the impolite feeling of talking with my mouth full. Strange how that transposes into thinking with my mind full, a capability that is as rewarding as it is difficult. In the interview, just before Andrews is drowned out by the O'Reilly factor's percussive jingleism, he manages one last beautifully timed snippet. Context is crucial. Andrews' fans might recall one of his earliest theoretical essays, Text and Context, which ends on two other snippets. Readers embody texts, physical, language. With us this evening, to embody some texts and fizz some language, is Bruce Andrews.
Thank you for that introduction and for the first reader, and thanks to John and Lynn for getting me out here, and thanks to the hardworking sound engineer video person in the back of the room, and thank you all for coming, and I could probably thank the people who had a party in Berkeley last night that helped me start celebrating St. Patrick's Day a little on the early side. John, and I don't know if John still had this in mind, but he said maybe there would be questions after, or there would be some kind of discussion after, which is great. And it was also suggested that I maybe read, since I haven't been here before, and this would be mostly students who might be unfamiliar with the work, that I might read more of a cross-section of my work over time, which I had thought to do, and then I had too much more recent work to do, so I'm not going to focus on anything much other than things from the last decade. Let me also make two plugs. One is that if I'm going to be reading on Saturday in San Francisco at Small Press Traffic with Leslie Scalapino, very happily, and a completely different set of works I'm going to read Saturday. And also, I'm going to read tonight some pieces that were done in performance with Sally Silvers, the great experimental choreographer from New York, and my gal. And she's giving a presentation of her writing, some video work of her choreography. She's going to do a live choreographic performance, and I think we're going to do a short collaborative piece on Sunday. She's performing in Oakland in the series 21 Grand. I don't have the addresses for these things or the times, but just to let you know that there'll be some other cool shit happening later in the week. Okay. If I was going to do a cross-section of work, I would read some things from the 1970s. I started writing 40 years ago, right out of college, and the work of mine in the 70s is extensively online now on Craig Dworkin's Eclipse site. The work of mine from the 80s is mostly collected in 2 volumes, Give 'em Enough Rope, and I Don't Have Any Paper, So Shut Up. After those long sequences, the next thing that came up was Lip Service, this long section, this long book, not really translating, but working with Dante's Paradiso. I'm going to read the very end of that, the last of the 100th section of that piece. Both Shut Up and Lip Service are in 100 parts. And other than that, I'm going to read sections from the Millennium Project, from the first and the A section and the B section of that. The C section of that is up also on Craig's site on Eclipse, and that's 1,000 pages long. So there's a lot of reading if you've got some spare time. Spring break, I hear, is coming up next week, and this would be the perfect occasion for sitting with your computer and just reading 1,000 pages. Beach reading, perhaps. Anyway, so I'm going to read some sections from the 2 other parts of the Millennium Project, from Cone Melt, which is a collection of verse pieces, and Impatient, which is an exploration of the sentence in a prose format. I'm going to read a couple, and then I'm going to read 2 performance pieces that were edited live with musicians in one case, or musicians and dancers actually, in both cases. So that's what I have planned for tonight. Okay, so these are some sections from Cone Melt, which is, I think, actually almost all the work I'm reading tonight, other than Lip Service, is also unpublished. So this is the only place it appears. These are some pieces from Cone Melt. And I could read this is A3B2B, which will be followed by A3B3B, followed by A4B2B, A5A3B, A5A3C, and A5B2B, and then finally A5B2C. Oh no, A5B3B. Anyway, so I won't read the section's titles other than just then. All right. The hills are alive with stress. Daydream, self-starter, if wants eviscerate, any surge of certainty craving, alleviating, privately as slur, rule, sleaze, token hibernation, playtime pouts. Amnesiac desire, your straight talk is fake. So you're more comfortable being looked down upon? Why 2 people? The discretion that refused to die. All accidents refer to each other. Hand-me-down chapstick, so young. Wish I'd known your thoughtlessness is over-impregnated. Arctic innuendo, the cool biting, very little. Meaning, nothing. Self-important with urgency, really good is pretty good. Amazing is too big. Your mistakes are damper. Typewriter spasm, gas masks for fingers. Provisory panic of vibration, obsolescent goo smitten by grooves. The throwbacks are on hold. Once upon a time fucks up your nostalgia. The hasn't been helpful is unnerving to see what the logic is behind the sequence of paragraphs, can appreciate a coronary, wit slumps pseudonymity as philosophy's tentacles of failure based the diction, If the creep gets over-nominated, alleviated hog, non-thing, says who? Hyphenated by hopelessness, tails wag listener, a specializing pomposity disappoints to detoxify a classier nemesis. The page rides shotgun for the word smudge comes autographed in each copy, strangling the positive. First theory pertains to rude children as sapiens, the egregiously spiritual precocious curare. Better to masturbate than to publish. Humor's stiff, impervious to haw. The slime is ambidextrous. Queens for information. Boredom. Decree makes a vehicle of gall. Bring the knuckles to the knees. Doomish pedigree, terror in a tentative town. Your body is luggage for gravity. Documents make us feel outdoors. You sure is a tonic to yourself, those fibbers. My friends call me pollen. Girly basis, life with sheep. I do things just to be dissatisfied. Hey, horse feathers. Don't lose your stirrups. I don't think his neck will take hot water. I shall not bore you with long explanations. Take my antiques off. I'm an in vitro man. Quote, I've had an elegant sufficiency, unquote. I'm ranched out, not while I'm awake, who had to learn to write with a promptly laughed down pencil again. I learned the beverages, keep your money, and send coconut cream pie. I weatherized your mother. I'm a squid freak. If I'm in the woods, I shoot something. Nothing more than NutraSweet? You bet, it's a lapdog problem. Will you shut up and think long range now? You're an opponent after my heart. Come, let's have it out. He may be balking, you bet, because he's bored. If I want your opinion, I'll beat it out of you. That's not very bright, that's slangy. Can't get the car, my marks ain't so good. Take my dog, beat my bone. I'm such a starched shirt, I brush my teeth with white bread. Don't put me with the law books. Just because I have a big apartment doesn't mean I like people. I want to. I'm myself, lie down, alone, I'm hungry, to use the vernacular. Old days give me gas, rapido, hairnet, as the asphyxiation agent to give us insomnia. So if you're an intellectual midget, bad spelling is not egalitarian and it is not revolutionary. I apologize for the bad typing. My category just seceded from my nosebleed. You're entrepreneur. Avoid trivia. Pride and price refuses to regress to the mean, and I did not proof it carefully without the slightest pity. He sews monkey glands into them. The syntax has broken down, but the sense is clear. A veritable body of evidence. Well, rock my connotations. Dinosaurs get ideas to approach long-term goals like they were short-term goals. If you construct it, I'll call your bluff. Devout under sus perks to be normal granaries of conscientiousness. Bilingual stuffer stenotype. Lobotomy improvement. There's a slacker born every minute. Let's go to Pottery Barn and flop to task, vindicated by the antithesis. Action breaks rules, which are frozen ships of hope. Habit flips morpheme first, fun, formalism by formula, top-heavy with climaxes, as if a little student anthology of Hegel had nothing to do with dephlogisticated air. Faith lost its debt list, worming poetics, short shrift to tort law, make lists, not war. Huffability wrestled stats. Everyone should disown a machine by eating off a source's plate. Blockhead, siesta, lessons, sugarcoat, a catatonic airbrush, subsumption, gurus leave by backdoor. Erratum. Page 7, line 4. For philosophy is ancillary, read philosophy is fundamental. All literature should resemble all of literature. Repeat the 1,000 most widely used words. I shed the insect gene, the colon within provokes, fame euphemistically called an empirical question, anti-chic contrarians, centuries of Methodism, chemical annoyance of structurally inept salivation, if greens could manufacture their own water and cook themselves in it. Watch it rivet the prawns, accessorize thoughts to salute slap ethics, half-mast, Yahoo, atone. Every story has a lead. My lack of sentiment is sentimental. Impatience makes me violent. My personality does not interest it. It's great to be an American in trouble. I don't know if it's altruistic. They're making me drop kick my progress so that, are you a yuppie? All my dreams turn to plans. Do you identify with your Vita? Your brains are just as artificial as the next guy's. Give me some of your testosterone. I married a metal storm who foster else fuck anxiety as affectation. I'm trying to find some substantial work. I just want to keep pushing myself out in the world and to keep succeeding. When I do some duty bushes, I've become extinct in my own lifetime. All bodies will die. I think people are interesting if you pay me enough. I don't think was a reason. He wasn't dead when you were important. How can I be less abstract so I can be more popular? Validity irks me. If F.O. Matheson can commit suicide, why can't I? Dear colleague, so young, so bad, so what? I was into jazz before I was old enough to drive. I took the bus to the record stores downtown the day my dick broke off. But is it possible that he actually said things like, quote, fuck all that fuck, unquote? Why didn't I get to grow up in public? I don't have any ideas now. Nobody beeps you better. Don't pinion me. Relax your claws. Cortisone, that noise pussy seizes literalisms, the concentration innocence pretends to be. Brains is accusatory. In the fantasy, she always settles for the little I have to offer, meaning the unfeignable disempathy with a hard-on, or is lull a tease and unfix that schism? Smoothness, the breast extols fertility delay, a cannibal's test gauge, heat chassis with music of nude fracas fear. No, you be Conrad Aiken. Self-emphatic remedy is its own reward. In the demand by women to have it so it, quote, makes no difference that you're a woman, quote, men feel and fear the threat of women saying to them, quote, it makes no difference to me that you're a man, unquote. The only area where flesh is tolerated, sentences have replaced ideas, is around the breasts. Sleep, ex-whites are so casual to save time, abate your fate. The compulsion to know everything is the road to insanity. Parents killing their babies for its own good. Blindfolded is not stupid enough. It's not horny. I think it's retarded. Thought burns blame the demagogy of common sense. The irrelevance of scale as an index of sense. Quote, child not constantly stroked belittles to gain temporary relief from worthless, unquote. Despair's landscaped conceit to one's authority. Desire vomits receipt. The ones who control best are the ones who won. A crazy emancipation. Life as a perpetual disagreeer. Precedent is the problem. Faults of transmission may look like signs of spontaneity. Prudence is the hubris, always good when family die, terminally goofy, safety, that caress. Getting older is just like making a list for the summer. We are distinguished only by the money we make. Anything that is misleading, non-specific perks is a mistake. Depict the inconsiderate as a force-fed fallacy so that at least ability is not dependent on anyone. Nothing's going to change. So we might as well see everything. And the last of these cone melt sections. God is neither a Democrat nor a Republican. Job to help people join the middle class. My name dropping a curriculum in earnest. I don't have any politics, but crustaceans, teamwork, fast asleep. She said we weren't in the major leagues. Chip off the old intrinsic paternalism. Resume is its politics, and I am not a quisling. Make me sick of money. Sanctify a hectic career. Revenge is purely ethical. Grants, please. You can't let the talentless improvise, can you? Expectations channeled Fordham, not accommodated. Don't censor your hot seat. Nothing new cannot be co-opted. Radio, push me up. How you say, pest management, sleeping with banks. You use that branding iron like a real humanist. Damn the defiant, goonless pride, goonless pride. Only the educated can be invidious. I was, regardless of expense. I told sick jokes, too. You just think religion is a discipline problem? Bob, I don't owe posterity a thing. Drink to hear yourself believe. Was I impressed or what? And here are two sections from the middle part of the Millennium Project. This is, overall title is Impatient. This is where I'm trying to write sentences. This is one of the, well, anyway, this is two parts. You use cliches a lot. I don't know whether that's good or bad. Come off that corpuscle. I don't want your comment. I don't remember asking you to talk. Just because you can read doesn't mean you're human. Stress test, get real. Retreat, praise. Self-contained dwarfing to buy success retains a sense of order. Sprinklers control me, prepositioned by your own fantasies. The extortion is embastardized. How's my little skill? Did you pass your compulsory attendance test yet? Self-serving voice absolves eternal debt. Frame breaking, punishable by death. Tag me no work, and we work. Quotes skid, a cardiac finish, fisted exoskeletal gender kills debris. Sex stamens compile throat with match head. Slaves of improbability trot out the mouth. Groin, a book I want more hollow without transplant. I remember seeing those thoughts somewhere else. He wanted to get me to mechanize him. Well, if I play the verse, you can follow me. One hand covering eyeball, the complete jargons fix your thrift. For mesmerism, we must be rehearsed. Propulsive of boys, I'm being eaten alive by my goals. Style predates intake. Apparently I did, quote, seeking the bubble reputation, quote. That took care of my answer. The last thing in the world you want is for your organs to conduct so much electricity. Memory is more palatable than memory crutches to achieve a bright future. He has ignorance of ignorance. Harm does persist, not only repressed, but ignored to be parented by furtive product. Don't drink water, fish fuck in it. Eat to avoid inspiration. They don't procreate well in captivity. The deepening atmosphere of fear seems to favor irrational behavior. Lockstep wants company, just gulping down her formula. The integrity seems to have been discounted. Affect contraction imposed order that mammals could disinform. Quotes are surplus smorgasbord losers. Limp to talk shady talk trains of bed and brainwaves, pomp-free. One hand buys the other, and absolute impotence corrupts absolutely. The masculine is at its gift advantage, makes news a neck into virulent states. Your failure lacks respect. Who writes your material? Derive me out. And here's another piece from Impatient. All cocks are shuttlecocks. Honeymoon, car wreck, oh boy, all person, singular, high, clit, Antoinette, spinal, jackboot, jism of intentionality. Wet out greed backward. Zeal, repeat, petting schismatics. The bachelor is temporary. Parasites eat better here. A gram of mermaid puppy treble. Spermatic, but eyes for myself. Bias more with co-equals contraceptive crash course. Not jobs, just little scams. Trying to get you hard while you're reading. A non-erotic female in an adolescent male world. Predicate felon. If it's ripe, it's nostalgia. On the radio, I waited for the 19th century to end. Pronominal impertinence. Whitewash ample alibi seclusion. Yo, crawl space. Wrong-headedness, paginated clitoris. The uncircumcised pencil. Hormone, commissary, mammogrammatically same-sex page-turners. Bother. Slash. Fuck. Butter. Sleep. Books. Vaginal insects. I was a bed phenomenologist. No more. I don't hive the different nights. Do you think I haven't thought of that? Intravenomous, liar, invert, confessional flirting, feministically wet. Quote, action means decontextualized. I requisition the verbs, menstrual, otherwise. Penitenting doorknob-itis. Who sucks what? Only machines keep promises. Circumstantial puberty, integer weddings. Sudden anal temperature boredom. Pronoun list, Childbearing hips, I swallowed you too soon. Paranoiac anathematizers come laudably naked down to your mutatus mutandus. Gangsome two-star alibi. Iambic porn orgasm auction when decibels could live. Go Dutch on trouble. Speech-defying catnip jerks of fancy cunning little vixen. Semenominal. Bump cute. False permission. Pig-headed by rejects. Contradiction triggers. So the next two pieces, the first of which is longish. This first one, I guess I should explain this a little bit. About, well, I guess it's been a long time, maybe 20 years ago, I started a practice which I hadn't really seen other people do before, which was to edit my work live in performance, collaborating with dancers or improvising musicians. So where I would basically come into a performance situation, sit at a table, piles of cards, little pieces, 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper cut in 6, which all my work is done on now. As I mentioned in the introduction, the thing that changed the formatting of my work methodologically was my purchase of a paper cutter in the very early 1980s. Anyway, so I would come in with these piles of cards, and I would basically do what I do at home on my sofa. I would just be creating phrases and sequences of these cards, but I'd be doing it live instead of at home. So this first piece is and then when I finished the performance, I would, type up the results as a kind of transcript of it. So this is the material that was done live in a performance in Chattanooga in 2006, where I was improvising with Sally Silvers and another dancer colleague and a drummer from the Shaking Ray Levi's, and Bruce Kaplan was playing improvised mandolin, actually. So this is called Thar, 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 Thar. Heartache a la carte. Pretend, just pretend. Open your mouth a little. Pre-toxic. And now we lord it over you. Get some help. Do your duty. Stop the clock. Midnight, fallible, firecracker. Little juvie rhymes scrape off the dollars. Funk the Googleplex. Jello shots to parlay a culture into a nation. Cyberville, morph into bug-size misdemeanors, honey. Address the object of your fantasy towards a phenomenology of doggy style. Take off the headphones. Under-Englished, biblically on Mars. Your boyfriend won't mind. I slept with him already. Telebubba, telesassy, courtship freakin'. A megaphone made from earthworms. Frothy. Baby wants to mix. Fierce in between. If you could cheerlead the slabs. Scarcity? Fuck it. Skitterable, Popeye, sweet spot. You Roman? Trickerative. Blood grows teeth. Spendin', monkey contraception. Micro mecha chemo drum. Power humpty. Smear the cheer. Give me some of that spreadin' democracy. We try not to wish. Freakonomics, dreaming in pieces. Chalkmark the brain, a weapon in the class war. Peppery dosage magnet. Imprecisi climax confetti. How do mammals get promoted? Spaz rhymester, all adjunct. Surge protected, blacker risk. Don't cut up your friends. Botswana. We eat no culture. Searchin'. Oops. Hick hop. Guilt sultrier. Your ink or mine? Hemped up crystal. Zodiac Criminopolis. Every amputee for itself. Doomsday bête blanche. Freak the job. Your mouth has cargo. Word themselves. Genocide on your ambience. God, the smoothie. Eke whoopee cushion. Nibble on a crystal. All facts, eat out. Yo-yo is a sexy, quote, igger, unquote, and precision makes it less ugly. Uh-oh. Digressive choice, who's kidding? Get higher beat science, backwards jitterbug turns. Could have been odder. Finally, something radical enough. Blow the 5-star. Curve job group selfing. Days are always wrong. Why not go for full-scale cultural revolution? Breakbeat, suckling, utopian sleaze. Layer cake. Spacio who's it. Children without hatchets. Money doesn't buy love, but you can rent. Better slaves. Don't hurt the people you hurt to, quote, blackjack each other. Do we get to Bug-Eye? There is no heaven. There is hell. The shine on the plie, warriors on strike, creatures who can auto-shimmy, nibble, tipsy-teasing, watermelanin, unprepped, snap-on shimmer, verve up the bottle. Do we have to be traitors? Does international law require it? Does justice demand it? Palm. Starbute, ticket to rupt. The anti-in-laws. Impresarier. Lights rhymes with nights. Puppeteer, overtime, heartache, figurette. Beat the charm and you marry a hybrid. Bubble chart dosage. Don't pronoun me down. The trickerators ain't me. Illustrious sentimentality. Heart catheterization. The world is our dreamboat to reboot the system. Implants on a dog. America, one roadblock. Xana Dum-Dum. Lumumba, explosive dramatization. Very interesting. So many cha-chas, so many bloopers. Trust equals perfume. Jitterbugging gray matter. Populist shimmy. Control smells bloody. Eat the fucky sperm out of them. Crazy quilt, pelican bustier. Mammal me, mammal. Everything cost a little more. Status algebra synapse party. Selecticize. Chew toy, chain gang, ego, home. Fear must be 18 or over. Bad folk, good folk. crucified money, the power boings. I write more when I'm not listening. Bad meds, broke back hootenanny, rednexploitation, sick twists tilt way back, minstrel gnosis mock the sulk, some kind of giant ovary. Holy Ghost sits in the middle, minus colored, stag-a-lease, incentivize your grammar. Shiny credit, the hello threshold, Shiny credit, the hello threshold, uber, upper, amen, rim shot, pre-soak details. Withholding as an art form. Pro, noun, pointy head with pom-pom. There will be a quiz. Deja voodoo, atom bomb. Nature is just pronunciation. Male shtick versus female shtick. Dynamite among the sedatives. Rockabilly Pavlov. To be old, ungifted, and white. Thumper, total snowflake. Scopes had guts. Up-tempo glue, Lincoln or Klingon? Teensy weensy bang bang study. Hallelujah the hula. Trigger happy bedside manner. Ultra deco bit of honey. Where can you get a good pot roast, meatloaf, tuna casserole, mincemeat, chicken fricassee, pot pie? Plot equals automatism, the sharpest tool in the box. I had to get crazed. Unmade booty commando marzipan sampledelic. Threaten the geek. About to get punched. Flesh on, off. Bow with your chains as your bandages. Heart can bunt. Insouciantish. Let go, let go, let go, let go. We kick the police. Want your elders to compete over you? Change zero. Warning. Tighten up your Houdinis. Celebrity cuckold. Guilt eats fear. Quick step notched parenthetical menaging. Men have their little blue pill. You do catastrophe. Cutie church of shooting yourself. Quirky barometer on the hip. Suds, brood, short shtick. Do we want those arms? Reduce horizontal space versus reduce vertical space. Tote up universal elixir. Dripping what? Plenty plasma tongue example. Dancing, up-tempo prayer. What do whites need? Ideology kooking, everybody licks up front. Whatever doesn't, doesn't. Make smooth illegal. Flaming hot sucker punch pixelizer. Quote, spoons, people who get out of jail and stir things up. Sperm bank clamp on sugars. Planet oops. Sticky meth, petite proletariat. Zoom hypo. Feedback lounge. Silverized evangeliton. Whoops guaranteed to put me in your microwave. Bed rhymes with head, rhymes with dead. Folk, us. Afterlife, don't start. Shimmyized thermonuclear slaves. Peignoir, CAT scan. Yodeling, the manipulated falsetto. Impromptu stinger. I can't sodomize you unless you bend over. You also have the legally protected right to insult to brain. Pum, pum, pum. Mildly clumsy. Nobody is a people. Pixelate social net speed per pinball. Mix the max stimulus 90. Triage by snakebite. Bracero kiss off traffic in triggers. Who wants Jesus dead? If you had a vote on the crimes to be committed, ultra low down biodecider. Who? Lionheart. Big top. Groove therapy. Don't madam yourself. Choice, micro yo-yo. Jiggle down the cherry pickers. Dalmatian America. Go lowercase yourself. black and white, anti-lick, over chastity, tight, capsizing a dream with a throttle. Iraq rhymes with lotto. Tropica, who smiled first? Brownie fellatio. Live inside the snake. So many notes, so few guillotines. Flesh pinata. And next, this next piece is something that I did a long version of, edited live in performance at the Visions Festival in New York, performing with a couple years ago with Sally Silvers and a couple of improvising musicians. And then this was edited down, partly with Sally's advice, to the text that I used live in performance at her last big dance concert in New York, which was called Yeside, and the overall theme of the dance was whiteness. And this was interspersed with some soul music, Working in the Coal Mine, Green Onions by the great Booker T and the MGs, and some other things which you'll have to imagine sort of backdropping me DJ-like here, which I don't have any other than my voice here. Okay, so this is from Yeside. South rhymes with mouth, a kingdom of lips. Whoopee to sugar, honey up the cocoa. Use me as a tackling dummy. Hide away neck, if it takes your skin off. Your first name is Hello, pillow lockdown, ultramud, botherating, slush 'em ups, yakety Dracula. Mouth, make a fist. Candy in the canyon. Blood makes you pretty. Foxidize. Quick step, tenderloin. Things is good. Semi-sweet. Chernobyl inside your body. Tears are your donations. Missy neck. The nowhere me. Noctunier. Wish for too much. Slower than cream. Ooh-wah. Foreplay symptom. Self-aggrandizzy. Strap-on ethics. Your heart's a moving violation. Love is your chemotherapy. More. Somebody. Touchy nights. Audition different parts of the skin. Thumpity, thump, thump. Vixen hip. Goofier than thou. Wetness protection program. Normalcy. Never again. All we hear are dreams. Fantastic. External fixator. Emotion. Obstruction of justice. Now you be a good boy, and is no longer derogatory. CIA, Allah. Freedom rhymes with retarded. Get out the mousetrap. Repeat after myself. All the pin drops in the world. Freakorama to rinky-dinkify. My thought. Call your doctor right now. Okay. Daycare brain, huge noun, preposterosity, oxygen smarts, glottal kickback, going where the meaning won't bother you. Bigger, weirder, wider. Peppermint integration. Bite somebody else's tongue. The past breeds. How far? Buzzer on the taunt. Knocking on. The future is precocious. Lib a little. In death penalty news, this land is your jelly. Talking Coolio. Hazmat. Trickster popover. Ballyhoodoo. Parachute rhymes with Dixie. Victim puppy. Courage eats last. Do white racists call other whites racists? Remix to the mofongo. Emergency tourists. You can't terrify a kid into being hopeful about the future. Quote, white consciousness. Oxymoron. Missiles of Cash, Frankenstein's Collage, Solidarity's Encore. Did we get dark? I have not been told the truth. I have not been told the truth. I have not been told the truth. Freedom Tests. Zipper Home, Catch a Fire, Dismount for Free, Whose Power Out of Our Hands, Ease Up on Earth, a Polylingual Slur. Your collateral is having a reminiscence. Police at Funeral, Peaches Infinity. If we could only be abolitionists. So that was Yeside. And let me finish with maybe the last half of section 100 in Lip Service. This was the one taken and based on Dante's Paradiso. This is, if you're reading along in the Dante, this is the end of the last terza primum. This is Prima Mobile number 10, which goes to the very end. So all the things I've read tonight were from the last decade. This Lip Service was written in the early mid-90s. So this is the earliest thing I've got. And this is also the only thing that I'm reading that's in print. So this is in the very end of the book, Lip Service, which apparently the University of California bookstore was supposed to come here and sell copies of, but hey, they fucked up. So you'll have to get it on another occasion. Be happy if you got some work of mine. It would please me. All right, so this is the end of the last section of Lip Service. And different mood and emotional tonality in this, especially toward the end of Paradiso. If you toss on a marshmallow, swerve extends out. New mayhem, never enough, stirs multiple hearts burn, Christmases of the heart in syllables. Anti-suggestibility glows, attenuate the immobilizer. Astonishment pulls at, then the pigments. I pack up a glance, pettiness crams, pink included, publicity, subscribe this farewell-soaked farewell. Dream, microphones, bellissimo, the stage, visible from a distance, high night, completeless, travestied surprise, storm relaxes proximity, ink at leap year, lip-syncing flash in dark. Kiss the book some, future, atoms. Access at silly, indefinitely diversify, calendar tossle, inclouded to higher change. And sweet dreams resisted fix-up treats without perfecter exile delight, no corners, zigzag, porous, luxury propulsion takes the arc through circumstances, farewell magnetizes. Illegitimate exclusion. Stakes contracted them all. Oh, let's have socialism, relentlessly gentle. Praxis singed, undoing most distant, privacy overreacts, parachuting the past. Oh, deign some spinning works its norm, precipitated in a moment. Wait for the book, enarmed, unionizing future, prejudging, multiple unscissored surprise. Cartwheeled tactics, dip your fingers in the vow, buried my birthday. Red partisan shocks, proof infinite to atoms, architected pandemonium, cut to fit the mouth. We're in the happy, neutral counter-automata. Dreams do come true. Matriarchal matrix, be anything to annex, willing, total, all is one, end of the world dance, luscious by the book. Give me a bigger cage, rootless, headlong, faction burst, delectable standard elsewhere, geometry at total, raptures, diaphanous, closeout diagram, generalizes fingers arraigned as chocolate. Adorable, base, alias, reality, image, refusal, emboldens, fetus, using your body without your consent. Its sweet front lathed with, this is something else. Propitious, heat, headless, opportunity, in order of promises, dirigibles of promise, we neatly did fill their blanks. Valedictory, honeymoon, burns in the pagination. The night mirrorist fantasia, fitted from blame, priority melts, less to write, paraphrased, hyperbole, retroversal than it, us. Rien ne va plus. Equally read, abode, pink, cope, lush, coda, abruptless. Risk, disappears, closing, perfume. Row of exclamation points. Unleash all tenderness, suspends future, to voice, vote, to heat, for hope, lay still late, let's start all over stars. Thank you.
Over the bells, if you'd like to ask presenters a question.
So I should all come back up. That's fine.
I know, you just sat down.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Been sitting down a lot.
Hi.
Hi.
Great reading. I've been waiting years for this.
Thank you.
I was rereading Divestiture E last week, and one of the provocative things in that I recall is, in terms of making, makes the claim that intention can make more surprising things than chance. And I think, lately with the structural revolution of the internet and the new kinds of forms that it makes, like Millennium Project, for instance, I've enjoyed drifting through that structure. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on the reader or audience presentation of the works regarding chance and intentionality. It seems to be that chance might have more possibility for endless surprise with the new development of the internet. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that, and also if any more works like Millennium Project might be made except for the internet.
Well, the relationship between the Millennium Project and the internet is just that that's where it's published, since nobody was knocking on my door to publish in a book form a 1,000-page work. So I'm not sure how that fits into what you're asking, but
There's a kind of, I think there's a kind of a chance feeling drifting through the structure, like not knowing what's going to come next if you go up or down or left or right.
well, the way that's set up, I mean, actually, and Craig figured out a way to do this in the presentation of it. The Millennium Project was based on extremely large body of material, which I edited according to a obsessively elaborate thematic structure, almost like an argument or an outline of a topic. And it was based on work that I had collected over quite a number of years that were divided into these boxes. So my work is usually stored up in boxes. And so I applied this same grid-like format to all the work that was in each of the 10, I think it was 11 boxes, so that you can then either read the material in one box, which goes through the whole thematic structure, or which is A, B, C, and then A1, B1, more or less what I read a few sections from in the beginning of Cone Melt when I was given those quote titles. So in the way it's set up online, you can either read through the whole thematic structure in one volume or box, or you could just go with A1, A1, let's say, across the 11 boxes. You can read it thematic. So there's a kind of thematic pull across. So rather than me just pile up all of the A1 pieces in one chunk. You know, they're separated out based on the volume. So that's, you know, in a way, so that's not really it's not a chance procedure. I mean, chance is something I don't use as a compositional device, although, you know, if you take juxtapositions of clusters of words or single words, and if you mess up and scramble the syntactical possibilities of it enough, it will often seem to people as if it's just random or just word salad or just, you know, as if I'm just in a Dada-like methodology, just pulling words out of a hat and things like that. So I'm trying to sometimes push the limit of what can hold together. You know, like what language material when pushed together can have enough magnetism of resonance and cultural referentiality that it will seem, you know, that it isn't just arbitrary or isn't just random. Which I know that a lot of people now working in the the FLARF or so-called conceptual poetry are operating with the internet in a very different way than I do, and I've always felt that I'm editing, and there's intentionality that comes in the editing process. I mean, I basically think of writing as editing, and everything is edited for me with an eye toward what will capacitate the reader, and then I'm the stand-in or surrogate for some notion of what a possible reader might be. So that's how I'm editing these things. So I'm trying to enliven the experience of reading more than simple, arbitrary juxtapositions might lend themselves to. So, I guess I still retain that belief that I wrote down in a journal in the early 1970s when I was in graduate school, which is where divestiture comes from. I still have that sense, that intentionality can get you places with the reader in mind that chance can't, And I think that there's been enough, so this is a long, running argument that I used to have with Jackson McClough and that I have with Kenny Goldsmith and other people about editing. It's because often, if you're interested in chance procedures, you can generate massive volumes, as Jackson and Kenny and others do, without having to worry about editing. And to me, that tends to undervalorize the reader position in a way that I'm not comfortable with. So, I mean, if we hadn't, it's almost like if we were only used to conservative verse, then, which I think was, let's say, the case in the 1950s when Jackson McClough was operating in the beginning of his career, then chance might be the best way to create a completely surprising kind of result. But I think now that's not necessary. So I think now we can actually get equally surprising or more surprising results that are more, resonant, that have more cultural juice or that have more possibility for sort of centrifugal extension outward into the reader's consciousness and into the social world, without having to rely on those techniques. So in a sense, I remember when the so-called language poets, at least in New York City, were confronting the work of people like McClough. What we were intrigued about was how drastic the results were. We didn't really care much about the methodology that got it to there, but that was what was inspiring, was how defamiliarizing the results of that kind of work were. And then we essentially wanted to push it further so that we could explore the terrain of semantics in ways that people like Jackson weren't interested as much in at that point.
Yeah, I have a rather a basic question, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it was something that struck me more so than even the poetry was your style of reading. I was digging whatever you were doing, and
Cool.
yeah, to become a caricature for a second. No, and I just two quotes sort of struck me during your in your poetry and in your commentary, where you say precision makes things less crazy, and then in passing during one of the transitions, you say there's no DJ here other than my mouth. And,
Okay.
I was actually, simply because you use such expressive yet furious intonation that seems very, I guess, measured or calculated when you approach or when you speak the work. I was actually wondering, how do you approach reading your poetry? And given, do you find that, just sort of coming upon your poem, either on the screen or in a book, if the audience loses something, do you find that the act of reading your poetry by the author is something that's integral to the appreciation of the text?
No.
Okay.
But I'm wondering, not to engage in further flattery, but that would be nice too. But I mean, if you could tell me how you were characterizing my reading style or my reading voice, because I wasn't sure exactly what part of it, struck you,
There was a certain sense of when you got to some of the key sort of moments in talking about post 9/11 anxiety or what have you, where you say spreading democra crazy. Really, I mean, there is a sense that even while you're reading, and if you slipped up, if you not slipped up, but just muddled the sort of pronunciation, you consciously went back and sort of reinforced it with that same sense of precision, or that other thing where you say dramatization, very interesting. There's a measured move to holding out words, sort of, with democra crazy, really sort of getting across your sense of transformation of democracy into democra crazy. So it was definitely that precision sort of intermingled with these moments of slow, or in one of your later texts, pulling back so you were whispering. And so definitely, at least maybe it's much more haphazard than that, but it did seem like you were really approaching your text through a very measured voice, even if it was, enthusiastic in its presentation.
Well, I mean, there's a couple things there. I mean, one is, which will show up in the way I read and also in the work itself, which is certain kinds of sonic preferences, So there's certain kind of consonant clusters that I tend to like, crunchy things or, kind of jagged edge things just acoustically. So that's part of it in a sense. So there's a sort of the distinctive soundscape maybe to me, and some of it has to do just the way I talk, and some of it, is just that, I am fairly articulate verbally, I teach, I've been teaching college for 35 years, and so I can project, right? And I can, be clear and crisp if I want to be, and I do like to be. So I like a trebly sound if I'm making music, more than muddy bass driven things. Some of it also is just my thinking of a poetry reading as a theatrical situation, So I'm going to try to bring out some of the undertones, overtones semantically, as well as in the sound text, the soundscape of it, to enliven what it is, and to give it more possibilities for the reader. So I'll say this, autobiographically, a lot of that has to do with getting used to giving readings in public. So I was, as I said, I started writing about 40 years ago, and I moved to New York after grad school in 1975, and up till then, so my first 6 years, let's say, of writing, I never gave a public reading. I didn't go to really public readings, to any great degree. And that didn't enter into my practice. So I was everything was just to be read on the page, sort of silently. That was my sense of literature. And then I moved to New York, which has a long tradition and a very lively poetry scene, and also had, there was slam poetry and there. All that stuff was starting to be in the mix too. But the people that were my peers, we started to read, and I realized this had a dramatic effect on my work, because I started to, when I was editing, I would start to edit work with an eye toward reading them out loud. When I started to write work, then I started to notice, or let's say I've written work and then I'm giving a reading. So I'll go through the work that I've written and decide what works to read. So then I'll read the works which go over better, in a live poetry situation, instead of ones that you'd have to sort of decipher slowly at home, et cetera. And that was part of being in a big city, in this kind of situation, and then that started to affect what kinds of work I would write. So then I would increasingly find myself interested in writing works which I knew would be audible, that they would go over better in performance compared to other types of poetry that I had been writing and was writing less of then. So things got more phrase-based. My earliest work, the stuff that's up on the Dworkin's Eclipse website for all these 7 or 8, I think, chapbooks of mine, or small and collections from the 1970s, the work was much more atomized, like little word clusters and isolations of single words, which were not, and that stuff is very difficult to put across in a public reading. So I basically started to inject more social material into the work. I started teaching in the Bronx, and I'm, had a completely different kind of social situation than I had before, and so all that kind of, all that kind of came into the writing, which it wouldn't have happened, if I'd gotten a teaching job, in the Midwest, let's say, or some small college town where there wasn't a lively poetry scene, and I hadn't, I was just writing poems, sending them out to magazines, getting published, and being part of some world out there, without ever getting the sense of, well, this is to be read out loud, then the work would have been different, So it was just the eccentric thing of me, getting a job in New York City that changed a lot of things for me. The other thing I wanted to mention was that there's a problem here that I think a lot of the people that I'm associated with aesthetically, the so-called language writers, have had to deal with in a certain way, which is that there's, I think, a desire in some of the texts, or some of the writing of the text, for it to be not based on an identification structure with regard to the audience, so that it's not the lyric, it's not autobiographical, it's not about me, it's about opening up possibilities for the reader. And that would ideally, in an ideal situation, well, let me see, how would I put this? That's somewhat undermined by highly, impressive or charismatic performances, because then, whether the work's about me or not, whether it has any content that's personalized in that very familiar way, it adds that to the situation, right? And so, it's not the impersonal or depersonalized or defamiliarized subtraction of the lyric voice, the way some of the manifesto-like statements might lead you to expect, right? Instead, that you're like, I'm here, so I'm fronting the language, and then it becomes easier to attach it to me, and that's, in some ways that can undermine the open field that I might want the reader to inhabit, just because there you are and I'm here, and there's physical bodies present, and however those things play out, that it can fall into the trap of exactly the kind of aesthetic that I'm just unutterably bored with, in a reading situation. So, but anyway, thanks for that question.
I wanted to ask if you could describe your collaborative process working with dancers and see if that's evolved over time.
Well, the lengthiest collaboration I have is with Sally Silvers, and I'll mention this. There was a very long interview that we just gave that was published in the St. Mark's Poetry Project newsletter and is now online, about the whole history of Sally and my collaboration, which goes back 30 years now, or almost 30 years. I'm the music director for Sally Silvers and Dancers for the company, so I'll organize soundscapes and music design materials for those situations. But the thing that I guess is the most distinctive, maybe, was when I started to do this live editing, and that opened up possibilities for how the texts would be presented, so that if I'm here, I'm editing things live, and I'm doing it in relationship to something going on stage, either somebody moving or somebody instrumentalizing, on various, musical possibilities, so that I'm not just thinking only in terms of the audience and how the work is going to come across. It's also directly shaken up or volatilized or messed with, in a sense, by the timing of what else is going on stage and how I'm going to play with that. So what I did find was that the method that I have always been, or at least since the early 80s, used to generate the work, which was always these little modular units. So basically, in the last 30 years, I stopped writing poems, right? So I don't, or else I stopped sitting down to write a poem. Like, here's my notebook, I'll have a draft of the poem, then I'll rewrite the draft and make a poem. No, I stopped doing that. So I will just edit things that have come from these piles of raw material that I generated sometimes years ago. I'm often working with piles of these pieces of raw material from 10 years ago or 5, 6 years ago, which means I have no memory of having written any of those words. So everything gets treated as if it was found material, and then I'll select from it. So it's not only distanced from any kind of hugging attachment to the work, like, oh, I remember that day sitting on the hilltop, but I had this epiphany, blah, blah, blah. And then, you get caught up in wanting to retain the memory of that moment. So that's all gone. So everything gets more open to juxtaposition, rearrangement, and those possibilities, but also everything's modular. So, everything I write is on these little pieces of paper, and they're generally just a word or two. That's it. So I'm editing, I'm making things out of completely modular possibilities, which then I found was exactly what I would need to perform with dancers, and exactly what I would need to perform with improvising musicians, because their work was equally disjunct, often equal, and this is certainly true for Sally's work, equally modular, equally based on these little atomic particles that are then, that I'm building constellations out of. Like, for instance, if you ever go to collaborative performances of dance and some kind of literary work, and you see a dancer performing with, let's say, a short story reader, this is death. It's because the level of continuity in the text just completely undermines any possibility of the dance coming in and out of different types of focus and perspective and meaningful possibility. There's just too much of that. So working modularly in this very disjunct way with these little small bits of material and creating phrases on the spot instead of having the phrases already prepackaged, and especially having the pages be based on some kind of memory trace that I've got, so that I want to keep them in and keep them the same way. All that kind of took care of itself in a sense. So it was in the late 70s and early 80s in New York. There were people operating in the experimental filmmakers who were friends of ours, who would make films in the same way. Henry Hills, in particular, was a very, very dear friend of mine that Sally has actually made co-made a couple films with. Henry used to go out with his Bolex and shoot 16 millimeter film, just camera rolls, not having a specific design of what he wanted. Then he would come back, chop it all up on the editing table, and construct the film in the same way that I was making my writing, in the same way Sally was making her dances, in the same way the free improvising musicians in New York were making their sound. So there was a kind of commonality among these different experimental arts communities in that period, very kind of hothouse environment. And we were friends, we were collaborating together and doing things, and it was made possible. It was facilitated by a shared aesthetic in some ways, and that was something that I just completely thought, well, okay, I'm in New York now. This is unbelievable. I can take advantage of this. Which I wouldn't. That wouldn't have happened if I'd been in a little college town somewhere teaching. So.
Last question.
Uh-huh.
And you've also written about sort of
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested though in that relationship between an open field and the kind of magnetism or resonance that you're talking about. And is there some hope that an audience can sort of trace that resonance in the text?
Trace it. You mean trace it back, or no? What do you mean?
Yeah, so you have an experience in editing these works together of this kind of something that holds them together enough so that it doesn't feel like a purely kind of pulling
Right.
that out.
Right. Well, it doesn't feel like that to me. It often feels like to other people, and so, I mean, I have a huge phobia about most forms of continuity, aesthetically, politically, historically, et cetera. So, and all that jibes together. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, so then I suppose, sort of building off that you wouldn't want people to sort of understand the same resonance that you experience in the text, but rather sort of create their own. So in that open field of one of your texts,
Mm-hmm.
a given reader would create their own set of magnetisms.
Right. Right. Based on their field of cultural association and their own background and what they're familiar with, what they're not familiar with. But I mean, I think what you're pointing to, there is a tension there, right? Because if you push it too far and the material just gets completely atomized, you could say, well, isn't this the most open possibility for the reader because there's nothing to grip onto, Whereas I'm aware that there has to be some kind of gripping situation, even if it's at the micro level. So I'm interested in these little, micro grips things that might happen in the text without it all being pulled together into larger argument or narrative or some kind of, transparent representation of something. So, so I could go too far or not go too far, and I also have to somehow imagine culturally what everybody else's associations are, I just in relation to, for instance, for me moving to New York had a decisive impact on that as well, because all of a sudden I left the library in a sense, so the work became less literary in a classical sense. The associations that I was playing off of were a little streetier in a sense. They were more related to aspects of pop culture and stuff that I was always involved with or interested in, that might have been less prominent if I'd been in a less really dense urban environment where things were really, ricocheting off each other all the time. So, some of it is personal to me, and so I got interested also because I'm giving readings live, and I also started performing, with dancers and musicians. So I'm in a live theatrical situation. So I discovered the value of humor, right? So I like jokes, I like stand up, I like, I noticed the value. Like if you go to readings, one of the things we all do is we go to readings and kind of check out what gets a rise out of the audience. Well, so you have humor, you have sex, you have politics, and so if I have fairly out there, completely out there attitudes politically, and fairly open out there attitudes about sex and relationships, people, etc., then I can play off that and realize that's gonna often be appreciated. I mean, some people may be put off. They may, if they're squeamish or if they're, reactionaries or on the political side, or if they're, super patriots or whatever, they might, be irritated that I'm not deferential to authority and to major institutions and, shit like that. But, those aren't the people that are interested in avant-garde poetry, right? So I don't run into those people very often, I don't have to somehow tone it down and think, now I'm reading before a church group, or I'm reading before, Right, so it's just not that kind of situation where I have to tone it down and not be able to have fun and break things up. So I like things that are abrasive. I like things that are funny. I like things that are outrageous. I like things that are unexpected, within limits. And then that's what I ended up concentrating on in a way that became very characteristic of me. And that's that kind of thing that people would tend to say about my work. But there is that, there is that tension. I think, for instance, people like the people that came out of the John Cage heritage, like McClough, would make the case that completely meaningless work that didn't engage the semantic level at all, and that crushed syntax down to total atomization, right, and avoided all authorial statement, all first-person kinds of statement, that somehow that would be the most liberating and the most freeing up for the audience. And so I've always had to contend with that other side, right? That how far toward that end of the spectrum do I want to go to break things up and granularize things down to this totally atomic level where things are voided of any possible referential possibility, basically all the things that the language writers, so-called, were accused of, right? The extreme positions on those fronts generally were ones we weren't interested in exploring, but since we weren't doing the classical thing, we could just be accused as if we were operating at that end of the spectrum. But so that's the tension, I think, and it plays out. It would play out differently if I was in a more conservative environment, for sure. I don't get to lecture like this in my American foreign policy classes, right? So things have to, there's a different level of expectation about coherence and continuity in those kind of discursive situations. So you have to play to what's actually possible, I think, especially when it's live. Then it's like, what can you hear? It's about the audibility of the connections too,